today not by phone, which we normally have them. We listen to them over the speaker system, but they're joining us here in person and live. So welcome to Dan Maldonado and Leslie Colner, and great to have you guys here in the flesh. And you know, we're eager to talk to you about the updates and what's going on in Washington. And you know, because we have a new member of the committee and the public as well, to the extent you can give us some context and some background and maybe go in a little bit more detail and frame the issues, that'd be appreciated. I know the councilwoman would appreciate that for all of us here as staff. It'll give us some, you know, some opportunity to go ahead and listen up. So the floor is yours. We're glad that you guys landed safe and sound. We know that there was some bumpiness in the air, unfortunately, in Europe, and I know that affected a lot of flights, so we're glad that you both made it here safe. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan and Leslie.
I thought we'd just first start with some of the recent efforts that we've been involved in for the city, and then go into some of the larger political picture that's going on in Washington. And why don't you start with, and I'll chime in.
Sure. We've had a number of recent successes. We had, once again, the Empowerment Zone Employment Credit was extended. There was a package of tax extenders that came together and were approved as part of the omnibus package in December 2015. And just to provide a little bit of background on this, in 2014, there was a move to cut these tax credits out completely. Senator Biden had introduced a bill, and they had failed to include the employment tax credit, which was really important to the city and a number of the businesses in our revitalization efforts here. And so we had quickly assembled a coalition of similarly impacted cities, and we were able to get the credit restored. This time around, they didn't try to do anything with the tax credit. So they kept it in, and it was extended for another year. It is, unfortunately, probably something that we will have to stay very vigilant on because, of course, there's always efforts to try to find money here and there. So this is something that we're very focused on. We're very pleased that it was renewed for another year. Anyone want to pull on the streetcar?
I think the streetcar project is an example of just the excellence and teamwork that has gone into this effort, including in terms of what the city has done with OCTA, and to position this project in a way that federally we're able to move it and advance it to an appropriations, an actual amount of money that can get the project moving forward. And I think what's important here is that the political support and community support that has gone into this effort and the commitment of local share into the project has really positioned it well in Washington. Because the name of the game is, if you don't have that kind of support and you don't have your cost share together, then you don't get anywhere. And so I think where we are in the process now is that as a result of the visit that the city made late last year, and in terms of building support and getting it into the president's budget, that we've succeeded in doing that, and now we have a budget request of $125 million that's on the table, that the House and Senate Appropriations Committee that have jurisdiction over how much money is given to new starts, small starts, can take this project seriously. So I think the next step in the process is, of course, working those appropriation committees and making sure that our delegation is 100% not just involved but champion it, and we have the fortunate support of Senator Feinstein, who is one of the senior appropriators on the Senate side, not only support the project, but wrote with Senator Boxer a letter to the Office of Management and Budget before the President came out with his budget that said we need to fund this project. And so I think we're in a very strong position to secure funding for it in this next go-around. And the only other thing I would add that it's important that we also move forward on the full funding grant agreement to make sure that's in place as well. So I think those are the two major steps that we have in terms of what the next steps are on the project.
And I should just interject for the benefit of the councilwoman, she probably knows this, but we did take a couple of visits to do a couple of visits to Washington, and accompanied by our by Holland and Knight, we met with our delegation, meaning Senator Boxer's office, Senator Feinstein's office, Congressman Sanchez. So all our delegation is well informed and very supportive of what we're doing. Met with FTA. So I think having this line item in the president's budget is very significant because it's the result of a lot of lead work that was done to it. So I guess my only question is that if there's anything more that we can do to make sure that as budget conversations and appropriations take place, if we, obviously we don't need to go any more because they know our story. I think we've told them our story. Is there anything that you think that
well,
would be helpful for you?
Yes, I do. I think that it's important that once we clarify exactly where the status of the full funding grant agreement between OCTA and the Department of Transportation is, then if that's been settled, then we go back to the Hill and talk to our appropriators and to Senator Feinstein to say the project is ready to go. And so we need all of the $125 million to get it started. And the only other thing I would add is that actually the effort to begin to talk about the streetcar project went back, I think goes back maybe a year and a half. So it wasn't just in the fall of last year, but actually a year and a half before that we started the conversation both with the agency as well as on the Hill.
I agree. So with that, I see staff's head nodding, so they'll be doing exactly what was said. So the next topic was a promise.
Yeah, so the city submitted an application for Palm Zone. We believe that it will be highly competitive. We have secured letters of support from Senator Feinstein. Congresswoman Sanchez is actually sending her letter today, and Senator Boxer is working on hers, but we will have it from all three. And last week, as I understand it, Senator, we were able to arrange a successful tour of Senator Feinstein's staff to take a look at the area and the neighborhood that would be part of the Promise Zone, and I know he was very, very appreciative of all of the efforts that staff made. So I think it was very successful. We have had communication prior to the submission of the Promise Zone application with HUD as part of our DC visit, and so believe we are very much on their radar. It will be extremely competitive, as it always is, but we believe that we've done, made all efforts to make sure that we're fully competitive for that. I think we've talked a little bit about the trip, but we did a whirlwind of meetings, and I think they've all resulted in really, really productive conversations, ranging from HUD. We met with their homelessness advisors, along with the Promise Zone folks. We've met with FEMA to talk about our UWASP, we met with the COPS office. The COPS office continues to be such a fan of all the work that the city is doing, as evidenced, of course, by our another successful award that we received this year, building on our previous successes. So we were able to really hit a lot of folks in a very short period of time to really tell the Santa Ana story. And I would just say a note on that, particularly in our meetings with the White House, I think there's a real recognition of all that the city has done, the transformation that has happened here. And I think that people really see how Santa Ana in many ways mirrors the national story, coming from this place, really a place of financial challenge and overcoming that and now being this hub of innovation. And so, we see as our mission really to get that story out there more, but I will just say, particularly in our conversations with the White House, there's a real recognition of the leadership that's happening here.
And the only thing I would add is that part of that leadership is the community involvement and the commitment to the community to be a critical part of the process and the transparency in the state. That's unique in many ways, and so it's a great sort of national story.
Well, you know, I should give just a little bit more context on it. I think you guys are very modest, by the way, and understated on what you've done, because I remember that first trip I think that we took, we had I think it was a 9-meeting trip in one day, so I've never been in 9 meetings back to back and all over DC. And I think we ate a sandwich on the run or in a cab or something, but whatever the case was.
Is that what I'm looking for? It's a DC diet.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, no frills. That was a no frills meeting day. But the takeaway from that is that we're starting to see that the fruits and the benefits of that, and the consequence was, I know that soon after that, just as you meet people, relationships get established. They start seeing what Santa Ana is, and we start defining our story to the legislators and the agencies that fund us, and they were very impressed when we started speaking to them about what we do and what we've done. So much so that they invited some of us back. Councilman Martinez as the president of Maleo has been briefed by a lot of agencies on different issues, and they invited me to be part of a couple of conferences. One of them being the policy leaders at the White House. And so there was a select few of us from across the country, about 25 of us that were selected, and it was to talk about exactly these issues that we're advocating for: housing, homelessness, public safety, and different criminal justice reform issues, things that we've addressed before. And so they were so taken with us that they want to continue having us as sort of their poster child, because what the White House realizes that, given the stalemate and Congress not being able to move a lot of the agenda, they're going directly to jurisdictions that are local and having the local jurisdictions address these. And so we've been successful in adopting most of the 21st century policing that our chief and the staff have brought forward. So that's, they're trying to encourage communities to do that. We went there with a resume of having already done that. And so many different things like, doing housing first for some of our homeless community versus the services preceding that. I mean, when we met with Secretary Castro, he was just taken aback at the fact that, we had done this even before our conference. And so all these things, I think, speak well of us, but I certainly appreciate what you've been able to establish for us, which is opening that door so we can tell our story, because it's hard enough to tell a story, but if you're telling it to the wrong person, or you're not able to tell it, or people aren't listening, you all were able to pave that path for us. And so I know that I was here before you all came on, and we had a different firm, and everybody has different styles, but I can, I think I'm confident to say that staff is, really benefited by working with H&K, and they've been a great partner of ours, and so I can't sing their praises loud enough. So I know
Very
that
kind.
the gentlemen will certainly hear more good things, but I know that those trips, again, have turned into millions and millions of dollars. So whether it's UASI, whether it's COPS, whether it's Promise Zone and FCA money, look, it's hard to quantify what the value of some of those relationships are. So sorry for interrupting. I just thought I'd know.
You just covered the rest of the.
I feel like
Right.
drop the mic here.
I think we should leave it at.
Leave it behind.
Well, we'll touch briefly on some other pieces, and then maybe talk a little bit about the larger picture that's going on right now. But on home funding, we've worked in coalition with a number of cities. There were proposals made to cut the program dramatically last year. We were able, working in concert with a number of different cities, able to ensure that funding was restored. On UASI, once again, we were successful in getting funding. On the Internet Tax Freedom Act, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. This was a really, really tough policy issue. Senator Wyden, who is now the ranking member of the Finance Committee in the Senate, but the Democrat on that side, has really championed the Internet Tax Freedom Forever Act, along with 60 bipartisan co-sponsors. And so we've been able to forestall passage of that. Senator Wyden stuck it onto a must-pass trade conference report and was able to finally get it through. I think the good news on that is that one of our lead champions, who had been Senator Durbin, in exchange for finally letting passage of this trade report that included the ITFA language, has agreed to, was able to get an agreement from Senator McConnell that we would get a vote on marketplace fairness, which has also been a really important piece of legislation for the city that we've been working on for a very long time, and that has had some votes out of the Senate in previous sessions, has not received one this session. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I think at least getting a vote on marketplace is good news. Should we talk a little bit about what's going on in Congress and
Please.
Sure. It's certainly an interesting time in Congress right now. We have about 45 more days that the Senate and House will be in session until July, when conventions happen, and really, for all intents and purposes at that point, Congress goes into recess for the November elections. And so, there'll be a smattering of work days here and there, but in terms of things actually getting done, it will, anything that's really not done by the end of June, I think, waits until after the election. There are
Jennifer Townsend is now exiting.
There are certain pieces of legislation right now that Congress is trying to push forward on. Things like reauthorization of the Federal Aviation Administration. They're trying to move forward on. There's some energy legislation that they've been trying to push forward on. But there's not a huge amount. The piece that I think will be interesting to see what happens is on appropriations, and obviously, as we were just talking about, that has great consequence for small starts, new starts. Republicans have been saying that they're going to do appropriations in what's called regular order, where they take up the bill, they pass each bill, they do it as individual bills. They've had a real hard time doing that in recent years, and so last year they passed an omnibus where they just take all the bills, push them together, and pass them all as one giant package. We'll see what happens on these, but we're following it very, very closely. Both Senate and House have been doing hearings on appropriations.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is that they even though you have a 2-year budget agreement that sort of corrected some of those harsh cuts that we were facing on the domestic discretionary programs. And one would expect that it would take care of this year and that they would get the bills through and just move them out, because you're not changing the numbers that much. You're working around the margins because you already have an overall number. There was a group of Republican, again, those are the hardcore conservative and Tea Party types that are basically pushing for substantial cuts, despite the 2-year budget agreement. And so the House Republican leadership is having to deal with that and trying to figure out how they put together a budget resolution that then sets the framework for them to consider and move the appropriation bills out on the House side. The Senate is not paying attention to
Christopher Townsend is now joining.
So the Senate is not paying attention to it, and they're going to go ahead and move their appropriation bills and wait for the House to figure out what it wants to do. But what it suggests is that in the end, we may end up again with a large omnibus appropriation bill, because the House couldn't get its act together.
Is that to our benefit or detriment?
It'll be to our benefit in the end, because the Senate's going to control the outcome on this. I think it's fair to say. And it may be that we wait till the lame duck when you get through the elections and everything, and if the Senate changes, that's a new equation. What does the administration look like? Did the Republicans remain control of the House? Did they lose some seats? Does it change the nature of, the composition of their membership on the Republican side? So all of these questions are, I think, up in the air.
I would say one thing that is really interesting to watch with this administration in particular is that you know, they're very much sprinting to the finish and working very, very aggressively. You know, sometimes you can really start to feel the energy peter out, and it doesn't feel like that from my perspective at this time. And so one of the things that you are seeing, and what we're working closely with staff on, is that the administration is really pushing a number of grant opportunities out the door, and it's very fast turnaround, because they're eager to take credit, understandably, but you are seeing it out of labor, you're seeing it out of DOT. So there's a number of places where there may be opportunities for the city to position itself for funding.
And that's right now?
Right now,
Yes.
yeah. So as we see them, we are flagging them, you know, and we'll work with staff to determine whether they're appropriate.
Now, on those, is there anything we can do as far as just helping other advocates? Just like,
I think this team does a phenomenal job. I mean, they are so responsive. We work really collaboratively, and you know, we're on the phone all the time together. And so,
Yeah.
I think really exactly what we're doing. We really work very closely.
Yeah, no, I have nothing to add on that one. This is, as I said at the beginning, a team effort, and I think that's what's made this successful, is that we've been able to work together to accomplish things on very competitive stuff. I mean, all of this stuff, you've got a lot of cities that have been in the game for a long time, you know, they're well positioned, and we've come in as the sort of the new kid on the block, and have succeeded in COPS, and have succeeded in Uwansi, and have succeeded now with transportation work, and we're starting to do work on the housing and homeless side.
Great. So I'm not sure if that wraps it up.
Happy to take any questions.
I think I'm good. That's been very thorough.
Yeah, and on the grant stuff, I mean, I know that we have some pending, right? The staff want to tell us like what's sort of on the front end, and you know what's maybe imminent.
Jorge is our coordinator on grants from the city manager's office.
And you don't need to do a whole laundry list, but maybe the ones that are most important.
Sure. Chairman and Councilwoman Mesa. The big thing right now is we're continuing our active transportation. The city has been extremely successful on the federal side. What's most relevant, and Holland and I have helped us the last 2 years, and I believe we're going to be applying again this year for the Tiger Grant, and that'll be one I believe we're going to be focusing on right around the Santa Ana train station, the grade separation project there. Previously, we had submitted for an Alton, the overpass across the 55 freeway. I believe we're now looking more at a grade separation project, continuing to look for funding there, working with OCPA where we can. At the state level, we have been successful with ATP, so we'll continue to work on those grants. At the federal level, the big thing is making sure that we continue to search for funding for homelessness issues and things related to that, as well as any programs specific to our veterans. We're, of course, very competitive in those areas, and now with the team that we've been able to put together at the state and the federal level, the pieces are really falling together. It's now what we're seeing is what grants are we getting, not will we or should we apply. It's really how we've been able to package everything.
Great. Thank you, and no, I think to the comment of the administration winding up, I think they're winding up to the extent that they're going to try to do as much as they can in these next, is it 10 months or is it maybe less than that? Or I don't know, I lost track. In other words,
What is it?
We have
9 months.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot can be done. And I think that, you know, we could be beneficiaries of that if we're shrewd and if we're, you know, we have good relationships with folks. I know that we've done, in addition to just grant writing, I know, you know, my colleague will support me on this and that. We've also, you know, tried to take up issues that are maybe, you know, not part of this list, but, you know, when it comes to immigration reform, just, you know, writing an amicus brief that will help support things like that. Talking about TPP, I know we have taken a formal, you know, position on that, but those are issues that impact our community, those are issues that impact our residents, and so I think, you know, it's important that we be holistic in our approach, but we certainly thank you both for giving us that comprehensive report. I always like to, sometimes bring my calculator out and see how much we've been able to garner with the 2 UASI, rounds that we, aggregated and then the 2 rounds of cost funding, and then, we could go on and on, and it starts becoming a big number
Significant.
over a couple of years. So I certainly think that, it's been an investment that's been well made. So thank you both. If you guys want to settle in as we go through the rest of the agenda. The next item is going to be, our state legislative update, from Townsend Public Affairs. I think Chris Townsend is on the phone, and Corey and Casey, you're visiting us here. Welcome. The floor is yours.
I just thought I'd say, Vince, I think I got what you're about to get, so I thought I'd stay away and protect the rest of the group.
Well, thank you.
But I'll defer to Casey and Corey. They'll have to report for you and be available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Also, in addition to Mr. Townsend on the phone, I would anticipate at our next meeting we'll be bringing on a new colleague that we've had start in our Southern California office, James Peterson. He just joined our firm. He came back from D.C. working for Senator Feinstein. Is now based out of the West Coast, and Corey and I will be utilizing James to help advocate on behalf of the city's agenda, and so we'll be roping him in to help further things that's necessary as well. I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the progress that's been made since October. By way of context, last October the legislature had just concluded their session and the governor was acting on bills. They came back into session this January. So a lot of the items they're going to be talking about are kind of new things that are on the board and are going to be progressing as the year goes on. One of the main items that happens every year is the governor's budget, which was released in January. Again, we're looking at a year with strong revenues coming to the state, and everyone's kind of fighting for their increased piece of the pie. Governor Brown is still trying to maintain some strong fiscal controls in spite of a growing budget, making sure that he fully funds, or as close to fully funds as possible, existing commitments that the state has made, and then building prudent reserves in the event of future economic downturns before looking to invest in new ongoing programs. So a lot of the items that we're seeing in the budget this year are investments in existing programs as opposed to new initiatives that are being put forth. Wrapping up kind of briefly from last session, which is a continuing theme on this session, was the statewide regulatory framework that was put in place for medicinal cannabis. 3 bills were ultimately came out as a package last year. That was the source of significant number of hours from numerous stakeholders that we participated in, the league participated in, police chiefs, industry stakeholders, and resulted in a 3-bill package which is now in the process of being implemented by the state. The implementation of the framework is going to take a little bit. Realistically, the state isn't going to be able to issue state-level licenses probably until January of 2018. They have, as of last month, brought on a new cannabis czar, if you will, who's the new person to oversee the state's operations. This year's budget includes funding for most of the positions for the new state employees that will be implementing the framework and the regulations. And then this year is going to be spent focusing on the development of those regs, taking stakeholder input, going through the regulatory process, which is about a year-long process. So that's going on, and then as anticipated, we have 10 or so new bills this year in the legislature that try to build on the framework that was established last year. I have some more information on those a little later, but obviously that's been a big item that's been going on.
Casey, before you leave that, does any of that framework, do you see any of that framework impacting our framework that we have here with respect to our ordinance and our measure? Are they incompatible? Is there obviously there's going to be preemption issues, supremacy clause issues, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, the state in putting the framework together, the state definitely wanted to recognize that localities had taken steps kind of before the state had acted and not and not undo what locals had done. So the state has definitely maintained that they're going to be preserving local control, deferring to locals. On the license issue, the state framework is going to require both a state license and a local license. So there'll be local input, and the state basically won't issue a license, a state level license without local buy-in. So in that sense, no. However, I would say that there are probably going to be pressures from some of the items that the state may do. You know, when they're looking at various taxes or things along those lines, those may have impacts on those types of things, although not the overall framework that you have to replace locally. And then, of course, I probably should mention that there's a very high likelihood that there'll be an initiative qualifying for the November ballot, which would legalize adult use in California, which at this point the legislature hasn't contemplated how those would have the medicinal framework and whatever may happen on full adult use would work together, but that's on the horizon as well. It's something that we need to be.
And it's polling well, from what I understand.
Yes, it's polling kind of where the proponents would want at this point. It has money behind it, so would anticipate that they should be able to get the requisite number of signatures to place on the ballot. The Lieutenant Governor's behind it. It has some tech money behind it. The Drug Alliance Policy Network is working, so it seems like there's kind of a coalition forming behind this one initiative. So obviously, once we get into election season and all of those dynamics take place, but yes, they're where they would like to be right at this time. Kind of looking a little bit forward, one of the items that we've been monitoring very closely as the bill introduction session took place was issues related to public safety and in particular gun control. There have been probably a dozen various gun control proposals introduced in the legislature. Some of those will be moving forward, some aren't. I have a few of the bills later in the packet here, but obviously given the high-profile incidences in San Bernardino and the rise of gun crimes across the state, the legislature is going to be doing something. I think a lot of that's going to be politically driven as to what what kind of compromises they can come to, but I know there's a lot of pressure amongst both houses in the legislature to get something done on gun control this year.
Yeah, if the councilwoman doesn't have a question, just on that, before we leave public safety, and I know our assembly members, representative might be interested in this. We all know that there's been a spike in incidents here in the city. There's been some discussions as to the causes and the fact that Santa Ana isn't isolated in this. You see this across the state. I know I've spoken to counterparts of mine from other areas, Northern California, Central and Southern California. But a lot of it goes back to the timing, and maybe it's a coincidence with realignment, Prop 47, and I think many of us believe those were in theory good things. I think in practice maybe there wasn't a lot of thought placed into the back end. In other words, the front end is good in the sense that you reduce the cost and the number of inmates, and you do early releases for the low or mid-level offenders. The problem is that I don't know if there was funding or a lot of thought given to the back end as you transition these folks out into the community. And the problem is that at the county seat, because we have the jail facilities here, people transition into our city and are released into our city. And so where's the funding from the state on that? Is there any discussion on that as you see more communities experiencing what we're experiencing? Because I think that, again, as well intended as that legislation was, I just don't think there was a whole lot of critical thinking with respect to having a holistic solution to this, where you release, but okay, what do you do with those that are released, and will there be an impact? And I think that there is, if we start looking at the relationship of those folks who are being released with the spike in crime in some communities.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good answer for your question. I mean, the governor has continued to propose funding for realignment, but at not abnormally increased levels this year, so it's kind of consistent with what's been done before. The governor appears to be focused, as opposed to doing something within the budget, to pursue a ballot initiative where he would be looking to provide more rehabilitation while people are still under state control. So hopefully would lessen those problems upon release, but right now there isn't a discussion about large investments kind of in the issues that you're talking about at this point. And then I'll let Corey chat about some of the grant items as well.
On the funding side, as Jorge mentioned, the city continues to be incredibly successful with the active transportation program. Last year was the second round of this cycle, and the city received over $13.5 million. The city also continues to be the only city in Orange County that has received funding from the statewide component. So it's a great testament to the projects that we're submitting. In addition to the statewide component, there is a metropolitan planning organization component, which for the city of Santa Ana runs through SCAG, and the city is successful in receiving money through that component as well. So as we look ahead, when the active transportation program was written into statute, it was to run on an odd year cycle. However, even though we are in an even year, that does not mean we get a break, as the 2017 round is likely to have applications due on June 15th, 2016. So it's coming up quickly. We're continuing to work with staff on your applications and working with your representatives to receive support. Assemblymember Daley and Senator Nguyen have both been great at expressing their support to agency staff and ensuring that the applications receive funding. A second opportunity I wanted to mention, and this is something that we brought up at the last legislative meeting as a up-and-coming opportunity that is now here, is the California Youth Soccer and Recreation Development Program. This is a new opportunity released through the Department of Parks and Rec, and it's focused on youth soccer, baseball, softball fields, and highly populated, low-income urban areas that have a high youth crime rate and a high unemployment rate. In addition to the focus on parks, because of the focus on the continued drought conditions in California, there's also a water conservation measure that must be included in any project that's submitted. There's only $16 million available, so it is a small pot of funding. The maximum amount you can receive is $1 million. Applications are due in November, so we do have a little bit of time to work with agency staff and receive their feedback on what projects we want to submit. And there's workshops coming up in the next 2 months that we will be attending and reporting back to staff as we start to develop what will be the most competitive application for that program.
Great. Let me turn it over to our Director of Parks and Recs who wants to comment.
I'm very interested in that grant. We've been taking a look at it, and the most competitive area is Santa Anita Park. Santa Anita Park already has lights and gate. That will reduce the cost. If you don't have a gate, synthetic fields need to be fenced up. And if you don't have lights, having to do a project would be like closer to 1.5 million or closer to almost 8 million. I mean 2 million. So I believe that Santa Anita, because it's strictly exclusive for youth, which makes sense. It's also, I believe, it was the city's first county injunction area, Santa Anita. So it is a definite area. It's also part of the harbor planning area. Santa Anita is right next to Harbor and First Street. So Santa Anita neighborhood is split between Ward 3 and Ward 6. I think it will be very, very competitive. The demographics are there, and we're very excited about that opportunity. There are other places that we could also apply, but that's probably, based on my assessment, the most competitive section of town for that grant.
It sounds promising. It can meet our audit criteria. Councilman?
A quick question, yeah, on the active transportation grant, how were those 3 schools selected, Sepulveda and Lincoln, for that one project, the state bus school?
Thank you. The question is how they were selected?
Yeah.
Well, based on use the demographics and also use the best use, and they looked at the way that the state grade these grants and the criteria that use, and we kind of reverse engineer that and identify the location that would fit, would fit and give it the best chance. That's how it was done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
If it's all right, I think I'd probably like to touch maybe on some of the larger issues that are going on within Sacramento and some of the things that we're going to be looking for upcoming in the legislative year here. One kind of overarching note is that the legislature last month had a new speaker sworn into office, Assemblymember Anthony Rendon. He's kind of the new wave of speakers. We've been going through this process where we've had term limits has caused changes in leadership about every 18 months, and so Mr. Rendon is the first speaker under the new term limit, so he, in theory, can be speaker for the next 8 years. So that's kind of very exciting. That might bring some more stability, not just to the leadership, but also to committee leadership, chairs, vice chairs, things along those lines. So that's good. Mr. Rendon has, in his opening comment, his speech that he gave, I think he's definitely going to be focused on issues related to poverty, providing, making sure that we close the poverty gap as much as possible, issues of homelessness, affordable housing. Given his background and where he grew up, those are issues that are close to him. He's indicated that he's not going to author any bills this year. Instead, he's going to work with his colleagues to kind of work on the state budget and help advance priorities, but not necessarily in a way where he's the lead person getting credit. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a culture shift in Sacramento, at least on the assembly side. But like I said, it's very exciting. We have new committee. He announced some new committee chairs for this upcoming session. So we're going to be operating under that. Additionally, just kind of in here we've kind of included some categories of legislation that we've seen introduced that are kind of going to be ongoing topics this year. There were just over 2,100 bills introduced this year that the legislature is going to have to work on. This is the second year of a 2-year session, so anything that's not done by the end of August has to start completely fresh again in 2017. So all of these bills will either get an up or down vote. There's no kind of holdover legislation this year. Issues that we've identified in here, affordable housing is definitely going to be a key issue. The two bills that we've identified in the packet kind of get to the core issue of what do we do about funding for affordable housing. There have been a lot of requirements on what housing is needed, where it can be, but we still, since the downfall of since the dissolution of redevelopment, have not gotten to a steady funding stream. Mr. Bonta is trying to make it easier for localities to use their boomerang funds to bond against. And then Ms. Atkins has a bill that would require the state to take some of its returned redevelopment funds and invest those in creation of affordable housing. The next item that we've kind of identified, as I mentioned earlier, was we have a series of measures that seek to build on, expand, or touch upon the medicinal cannabis framework that was put into place last year. Several of the measures deal with how to tax it, how to generate state revenue, and then where those revenues should go to. Also get into issues of licensing and what type of businesses can do licensing. And additionally, you kind of have a category of bills as to where limitations on where people can have medicinal cannabis, so near, not within proximity to schools or where it's otherwise not allowed by landlords, things along those lines. We're kind of getting into some of the, not necessarily core issues, but some of the issues that weren't addressed last year. As I mentioned earlier, also gun control. Numerous pieces. This is just kind of a sampling of bills. A lot of the measures have to do with either stricter background checks or limiting access to certain types of assault weapons. There's just a number of those bills, particularly after San Bernardino last year. It has a heightened awareness. Still going to be interesting to see if the state decides to put any money behind those, any enforcement. I think that's really where kind of the rubber's going to meet the road on this. And then in here we just kind of have a number of different items that are popping up, as is the case with any legislative session. Ms. Kim has a bill that would provide funding for the establishment of a homeless youth services project in Orange County. Would provide $25 million from the general fund to get that up and operational. There's additional bills, for example, by Mr. Bloom that would lower the vote threshold for stormwater projects to make it easier for localities to generate those types of revenues. And so they're going to back it up, and I happily answer questions on any of those, but for the sake of brevity, I'll leave it at that. And then I'd like Corey to talk about some of the ongoing issues related to water conservation efforts.
As you know, the drought continues to be a huge focus of conversation up in Sacramento. In February, the State Water Resources Control Board voted to extend the water conservation regulation to extend the governor's mandate through October 31st of 2016. The major adjustment that they looked at was capping a credit adjustment at 8%. They took hundreds of public comments, had multiple public hearings on this, and ultimately decided that an 8% reduction was the most that they would be willing to grant at this time. The two major factors that are relevant to the city would be an adjustment based on population growth, as well as new sources of water supply developed since 2013, such as the expansion of the groundwater replenishment system. The floor that they capped the adjustment at was that no agency may drop below a conservation standard of 8%. That mandate and those measures have gone into effect. Throughout the discussions, the State Water Board did say that they would want to revisit the regulation in spring of 2016. At this time, there is no indication that they will plan to sunset the emergency regulations early. In fact, they are looking at the development of permanent regulations for water conservation. This is something that we're keeping a close eye on. It would require legislation to give the board the authority to do a permanent regulation, and then additional legislation that would outline what the permanent regulation would be. There's nothing in print right now. Some ideas are being talked about. It remains to be seen if this will be a standalone bill or if this will be something done through the budget process in a trailer bill. Again, something we're keeping a close eye on. Those discussions are occurring. This is a main priority for Aqua. Kind of, a lot of folks in the water world have an eye on what the State Water Board is going to do. We expect this to be a major issue that we'll be focusing on over the next couple months.
Great, thank you. And we know that especially with Speaker Rendon being such having an extensive background on water, this is not going to be an issue that goes away. For communities like ours that have done pretty good in meeting our thresholds, we hope they won't be as onerous or oppressive. There's other communities that really haven't met their thresholds, and so I can see where the frustration is. But those of us who've been complying, and not only complying, but going above and beyond, it is a little disheartening. To the extent that you touched upon affordable housing and it being such a priority up north, please keep us posted. Maybe you can keep our director of planning and others, aware of what bills I think are moving through and what's important for us to support and maybe oppose. That's important. Gun control. Obviously, if you can continue keep in touch with our staff and our chief and our department. I think a lot of what we have to do is, we always talk about enforcement, but not just enforcement, but prevention and education. And, just dealing with ancillary issues like, gun control. I know in my ward there, we have the largest gun store in the county, and they just happen to emerge. And look, I'm not a disbeliever in the Second Amendment, but that doesn't mean that you can't regulate it, and you can't limit the accessibility and make sure that it's done in a safer way. So I know we've been speaking with the Lieutenant Governor's office to look at some proposed legislation there, but can you track that a little closer for us, work with our chief of police on that, and see what the chief thinks and what our staff thinks about good, responsible legislation that can be tailored to our community, because we just tend to see so many weapons out there, and in fact, folks are just using them way too often. I know we had a gun buyback program a few years ago, it worked well, but that can't be the only silver bullet or only solution, so we have to do a lot of different things, and not just one thing, but many different things. So, and on another note, I know that our Director of Community Development had mentioned a while back a bill trying to sort of reintroduce redevelopment, and, you know, there being a creative way to do that. We'd certainly be interested in following that up, so to the extent you can continue speaking with her on that, that would be great. And I know I want to apologize on behalf of all of us, because I think it was because of me that we ended up not taking a trip up to Sacramento recently to go do some advocacy. I got one of those bugs that just doesn't want to go away, and it's knocked a lot of people down, but I know it knocked me down that week. But we owe you a trip up there. I think we all want to go, and we have a lot of good friends. I know Anthony well, and I know people on both sides, and Assemblyman Daley, Senator Wynn are very supportive. They're good friends, and we have great relationships with them as well as others. So let's try to reschedule that, staff, and hopefully the councilwoman can join us, and she'll be a great help.
I would love to join you on that trip. I was very excited looking here at the governor's proposal for the budget for education. I know Santa Ana benefits from the local control funding, but I see here the $1.6 billion for early education, and if you can keep an eye on that. I don't know, I know we're not school board members, but I think that's so important, especially in our community, that we have early education first.
Yeah.
Everyone who wants it.
Definitely. I know the governor's working on putting a proposal together that would consolidate a couple of different funding streams right now to make a more comprehensive approach for early education. That's getting a lot of discussion. Obviously, there's a lot of folks interested and want to make sure that that gets implemented in a way that's workable.
Benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Chris, do you want to say anything before we move on? Are you still there?
I'm still here. We look forward to having you guys in Sacramento. I think excited about those couple of programs, particularly the ball field program. It's going to be competitive, but you guys have always competed very well. And Vice Chair Wananuska, I'm sorry to get to meet you in person today, but thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll get a chance to meet soon.
All right, Chris, well, good work on the ATP stuff, and, work with Gerardo on this on the youth soccer work, so we'll look forward to meeting up with you in Sacramento.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Tony, you're up. You're going to give us a quick briefing on the League of Cities.
Yes, very brief, Mr. Chairman.
Christopher Townsend is now exiting.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Ellis is in the house. I'll fix that.
Committee member, Ms. Watt, thank you for having me. Tony with the League of Cities. The League is currently compiling its priority bill list of high priority bills impacting local government. I'm told it should be done by the end of this week, so apologies I don't have it ready for this meeting, but when I do have it, your city staff will have it immediately. But just want to touch on some of the subjects we're already touched on. Medical marijuana, as was already stated, the League and the California Police Chiefs, who are a co-sponsor of the Medical Marijuana Regulatory and Safety Act, passed last year. There are a whole lot of bills impacting it, but one I do want to bring to your radar, AB 2614. It deals with the act. One of the deals that the League and the police chiefs struck with the authors were if any individual has a felony on their record, they cannot own a license to operate a dispensary within the state. Assemblymember Bonta wrote a bill that basically says if an individual has an out-of-state felony, they could still apply for a license and get one here in the state of California. And so the police chiefs of the League, we felt that was a direct assault on our local control and authority. So we're opposed to the bill. What we understand is that Senator Bonta is doing this for one constituent, a wealthy constituent who has a felony and wants to do business in the medical marijuana industry. So we ran a full court press, and what we're told is the bill was held by the author. Which that's good news, but a bill is never truly dead in Sacramento. So just wanted to put it on your radar. It's AB 2614, and we still have an opposed position on it. There is the Parker Initiative, which is a statewide ballot measure to fully legalize recreational use of medical marijuana. The League hasn't taken a position on it yet. Our policy is we always wait for an initiative to qualify, but we very much expect it to qualify. And as was already stated, the support is polling somewhere close to the 60s in that ballot measure. So, and one of the very reasons why the California Police Chiefs and the League decided to co-sponsor legislation last year was to have a foundation in case that ballot measure does pass. So that's on the medical marijuana front. There is one bill that I want to highlight that deals with workers' compensation. It's SB 897 by Senator Roth. This deals with temporary disability to injured workers, which they're entitled to for up to 2 years. This bill would essentially add a third year of temporary disability to public safety employees. Any expansion of workers' comp benefits is going to have a direct impact to local budgets. If the city wants to expand them, that's fine, that's the city's prerogative, but we don't feel it should be a statewide mandate given to all cities. That bill is going to be heard April the 6th in the Senate and Labor and Industrial Relations. We expect it to get out of that committee, so the real fight is going to be on the Senate floor. So again, it's SB 897, and I just sent out an action alert this morning. And real briefly, affordable housing is one of the League's priorities this year. It includes homelessness, finding a solution to give cities financial opportunities to address homelessness. So we just recently had a webinar which involved federal and state representatives. Senator Pro Tem De Leon had a bipartisan press conference. He announced the No Place Like Home initiative to give cities more financial tools. So it is a priority for the League, but there's a bill out there that goes about it the wrong way, and that's SB 876 by Senator Liu, and that's known as the Right to Rest bill. Basically gives an individual the right to sleep or rest in any public facility, so park, plaza, you name it. They would essentially be, the city would have no ability to have any, to remove them or any other capability to address that. So it is going to be heard the 29th of March in the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee, and we have an opposed position on it as well. And finally, I'm just going to say transportation continues to be a very big, high priority in the state legislature. The governor has lost a little bit of appetite to address transportation, but it does continue to be a high priority in the legislature. The League is a part of a coalition to address. Everybody knows, whether you're Republican or Democrat, the current formula does not work. It's unsustainable. But one side argues that it's due to not enough revenues, and the other side argues it's not due to enough reforms or efficiencies in Caltrans. So that continues to be a very high priority. We're a part of a coalition, and we'll continue to monitor it. With that, I'll just have any questions. Oh, I'll just conclude by saying that the legislature is in spring recess, and it reconvenes on the 28th of this month.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for that report. Councilman, any comments? No, we appreciate it. We appreciate the update. And moving on to, I guess we're on number 5, and that's here's Mr. City Manager. That's for the platform scorecard.
Thank you, Chairman Sarmiento and Councilman Andy and Expo. Welcome to the committee. So I'll be brief because a lot of this has been mentioned. I do want to thank everybody for the team effort and all the successes we've had at the federal level, regional, and state, and of course our staff and everybody who participated, and especially our leadership for being so active. We've had this agenda for a couple of years, and our guiding principles are really important. Make sure we preserve local control so Santa Ana can be in charge of its own destiny. Making sure we have fiscal stability so that we don't get involved in things that aren't sustainable financially, or unfunded mandates, or other kinds of things that are detrimental to Santa Ana. So as a general rule, if things are happening fast, we try to oppose those issues. We also want to make sure that we take advantage of all our funding opportunities. They've been mentioned, but literally tens of millions of dollars have been achieved for Santa Ana. And then what we do in partnership with the region, with other agencies, so we don't duplicate and leverage each other's resources. The goals are many. We actually have, I'm a big fan of page numbers. So we have about 24 pages of good stuff here. And we can add or subtract. Thank you. This is not all-encompassing, so if things happen during the year, we can make changes. But this is a platform. Number one goal, public safety, community safety, I'll go through this quickly, but body cameras has been an initiative, we're making progress. We have a pilot project, a lot of work in medical marijuana. The city has done tremendous work in the area of our DC legislation. We've got about 16 dispensaries open. We have less than 20 illegal dispensaries. As you know, we've got 100. And so the attorneys have done good. I think we've made major headway. Safe mobility with lots of grants, been successful. And also, we went to Washington, they gave us advice, we took it, we now have a Housing First program on First Street, so that's something we're really proud of. We added homeless and veterans to the agenda last year, and it's already produced results. Immigration reform has been a constant theme. We have had a spike, as has been mentioned. A lot of that relates to gang activity, so we're going to be focused on things that help us in areas of gang prevention, anti-gang programs. As was mentioned before, not just crime prevention, but education and prevention. So we are very focused on youth education and recreation. And the zoo, we've been doing some good things at the zoo. We're one of 2 cities with the zoo, and we're very proud of it. Economic development, affordable housing, common zone. We made major headway in the area. Our unemployment has gone down substantially from over 13% to under 5%. And so just clicking along on these initiatives, we talked about the economic development initiatives, working with the Housing and Urban Development Department. One of the big issues for us is the city's financial stability. It was mentioned. I do want to report that S&P gave us a AA stable, positive outlook for the next 2 years, and so that was a real affirmation of our finances. And then renewable energy grants, of course. We have taken actions against slumlords that haven't reacted in a way that they needed to, so we've done some receivership action. We're very, very good. Water conservation, we not only achieved but exceeded our goals. A lot of cities couldn't do it, we did it, and we've done tremendous work in the area of conservation. Mobility was talked about. We also have the bike lane projects that were approved. Community facility and infrastructure. The streetcar is huge for Santa Ana. Largest city in America without a fifth skyway. We worked on it for many years. $125 million in the budget. We have an agreement, Fred, with OCTA on the manage the project. And we also know that OCTA has a designer on board, a project manager, so we'll double check to make sure we're on board with the agreement. The grade separation is really important. We're a very high density city with a lot of traffic. If we can get that grade separation out by the train station, that would be fantastic, not only for transportation, but for potential redevelopment opportunities in that area. And then Bristol Street we've been working on very successfully locally. Made some progress there. We're very focused on infrastructure, the bridges, and of course our team in Santa Ana, with open data platform, transparency, engagement, and finally technology. So that's our report, Chairman Sarmiento and Councilman Amezcua. Any feedback, but I think we're on target for another great year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And for the councilman's benefit, for a lot of you, this platform didn't have any of the red comments that are on there now. The red comments show how much work is in done, pursuant to the direction of the committee and staff. And so there's a lot of red text, which means that there's been a lot of good work.
Yes.
So that's the way I see it. I can be more graphic when I look at this, and I see a lot of the work and time that's been invested, and again, a lot of the benefits that resulted as a function. So we see, not only our partners from H&K and TPA helping us, but also just the departments themselves going after grant money very aggressively, and that's always a great thing. One just technical note to staff. I know that when we first sort of revived this committee, we weren't sure whether the process was a good one on being able to be nimble enough to oppose and support legislation that came before us, and we had to do a quick turnaround. Everything working okay on that?
I think everything is working great, Mr. Chairman, City Manager.
Yes, it really helps us a lot, and we have direct communication with our partners. And because of the council affirmation of this document, we can make those decisions and not just wait for direction. We all know where we're at, and I feel it's really important for us to be on the same page.
I appreciate that. I'm glad that we were able to make sure we figured that out. It's important. One last question on the on homelessness and dealing with that problem. I saw that the county received about $17.5 million. I gotta believe that some of our visits helped to push that issue because we're probably the most impacted city by it. And you know, our visits with HUD, our visits with some of our friends, at the White House and talking to them about how important this problem was. But to the extent that we can, as staff, having our partners, talk to the county and making sure that there's a very proportionate benefit and allocation given to the city, or at least directed at the city, because we realize not everybody in the county is as supportive or shouldering their share of the burden on the homelessness problem as much as we are. So I hate for there to be some sort of proportional allocation to everybody when some communities aren't doing anything and other communities have stepped up to try to address this. So there's a real basic fundamental fairness here where those that are shouldering a lot of the responsibility should at the same time receive the benefit of these resources. So I don't know how we communicate that to them, but to the extent we can, Mr. Manager.
Yes, one of the things that we're doing, and in fact, I had a conversation today with community development. Every time we do something, we go ask the county to partner with us. So if we're going to put $1 in, we have something for $1. And that's a way for people that are actually doing something to leverage. So if another city, I won't name any, doesn't want to do anything, they shouldn't get any money. And we're putting $1 and gives $1, so it's really making a difference.
Good, I agree. Thank you for that. I know that's been something that has been on my mind. 17 million is a lot of money. So
Jose wanted to give you a score. He said A+.
Good job.
I kept writing A+.
All right. Okay, so having covered that, we're on number 6. That's the streetcar project funding timeline, and that's on H&H.
Well, we actually, I thought we had to.
I think we covered it.
I think we've covered it pretty well. So I think I know what our sort of marching orders are.
Great, that's easy. Then we can just move on to the last item, which is discussing H&K's expanding proposed expanded scope of service. So I'll turn that back over to you all as well.
Maybe it's better for us to recognize the work again that all of our partners have done, but especially Holland and Knight. And because of the success we've had in Washington, and the need to even go to the next level, we asked Holland and Knight to put together an expanded scope of work, and they've done that. And so if we could indulge you maybe for a minute or two, Dan and Leslie could talk about what we could achieve with what I would consider a very modest increase in their scope of work.
Well, I think we've, as a result of many of the visits and discussions with, not just on the political side, but on the administration side, have established, and with our think tanks as well, a sort of a profile story of Santa Ana and its achievement of turning the city around and trying to maintain its commitment to the community. Always areas for improvement. But I think that the story is, especially now with the double plus rating, an example of what can be achieved through Latino leadership, and the way that's been provided here in Santa Ana. So I think what we thought would make sense is to take it to the next level. Because I think in establishing Santa Ana in Washington, it begins to open up all those doors in terms of funding opportunities, so that thinking of the city in advance of a program, taking the ideas of what the city is doing and turning those into programs that can be funded and that the city can benefit from. So I think that sort of turn of view is very important in the way you begin to impact federal policy and federal funding opportunities. And I think Santa Ana is right there with the big players. So we think that it's a real opportunity to do so and to position ourselves with the new administration as well as with any changes that occur in the Congress. So that's sort of the framework. There's some very specific to-dos that, Leslie may want to just quickly kind of go over.
Yeah, no, I think David said it really eloquently. I think, when we began, we were sort of starting at this phase, again, emerging out of crisis and sort of doing rapid response and doing, I think we now have this opportunity. We're in this really great position. Our leadership is being recognized. I think part of it is expanding our relationships now. We've done some work with think tanks, we've done some work with thought leaders, but I think it's going to that next level. I think it's also looking for allies in Congress and expanding those relationships as well beyond our immediate delegation on the issues that we care deeply about. And so I think that, as we had sort of talked about this, as we start to see the new administration take shape, the new Congress take shape, I think we're going to have a real opportunity to showcase and highlight what the city is doing and to expand our relationships.
Councilman?
Well, now in terms of expanding this service, how much are we talking about?
About $1,400 per month? And it would take you just under over 9,800 or something like that?
Yes, that's correct.
It's about 16,000 a year more.
Yeah, and I guess that's a great question, and I think it was a great response because, if we could tell the story of just this relationship, it really was at a moment of crisis that we all realized, not can we dream big, can we, get the maximum allocation for the COPS program, for the WASI program, but look, can we just solve it? That was one of our first requests to you was just, being in the black and being able to, avoid that peril that all of us were in. And I think when we first met, you saw that shell-shocked look in our eyes and realizing, we were still, treading water. And so now, not that everything is perfect, but we're much stronger than we were before. And I think it's a lot of the work that's been done, in the past to put us in this, but also in the present to be able to make sure that we capitalize on those opportunities. And so I think it's, because we've established such a good relationship with the administration, it's really, opportune to seize that because we don't know what the next 4 years will hold or after November at the beginning of the year when the elections are over. I think that I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic, and I hope that we're going to have a friend in the White House and is going to follow the same priorities as the present administration. And so then it's a continuation of what we've had, which is those same good relationships. If it doesn't go that way, we probably will need that advocacy even more because it's going to be challenging to get the benefit of what we've received already. So we may need that, some much stronger advocacy. But look, I think that
the only thing I would add to that, Mayor Pro Tem, is the fact that the city really is a game changer. And there isn't a lot of cities like Santa Ana, the medium-sized cities. You don't think of game changers as large urban cores. And I think this is regardless of who's in the White House, regardless of whether it's a Republican Congress or a Democratic one or a mixed one, I think we can tell this story and we can position the city very, very well. And look at what we've accomplished so far with the mixed government. And I think that's what we're going to end up with. And the fact that it's being done by Latino leadership is a significant story.
I think, and once you get me started on this, it's hard to shut me up. But because we had hopes, and I had been asked to submit a biography on the city and work to the White House. Well, the president's speechwriter, who was going to be drafting the State of the Union, and so we did submit because they wanted to know who we were, and they wanted to somehow interject these different stories from across the country. And his staff was so taken by what I had told him, where we were, what our demographics were, what our average median income was. 50% of our residents are foreign-born. The fact that it's a 7-person council and all 7 of them are Latino, and as large a city as we have, and the challenges that we have, where we came from and where we are now, and it really did happen during this administration's tenure. So they were so, again, I think, taken with our story, that it is a very strong one. It's a compelling one when you tell somebody and you really give them the context of what's happened in these last 8 to 10 years. People don't, realize where we could have been and where we are now. So it really does, I think, speak well of leadership. I think it speaks well of our residents, because they were patient with us during that time. And they gave us many of the concepts, for us to pursue, and just to be strong, because we've seen neighboring cities.
Pardon the interruption. Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press star 1 now. When the conference will be terminated.
The only thing I would, add to that is that if we, I think we should take it to the next level, because we realize that the investment that we've made has just generated so much. If you look at this as a pure return on investment, I mean, it's really, incredible to see, what, our reasonable investment has been and what we've gotten back in return. So I think that I'd be optimistic in realizing that if we do more, we're going to get more as well. I'd like to, look at how we can leverage our position in the state as well, because I think nationally we tell a good story, but even at the state level, I think it's also a strong story to tell. And I think we have friends, literally people who we know on a personal basis. I'm talking about, members of the council, that could be good advocates for us. We have a great, a friend of ours who's, who represents us at the assembly level, and a good friend at the Senate level. So I think, we need to tell that story nationally. We need to tell that story statewide. When we tell it countywide, it doesn't resonate as well, because ours is a very unique city relative to the rest of the county. Our friends at the board aren't always as taken with our story as maybe some others would be, but look, that may change. We may get a friend on that board very soon. But the whole idea is that we've got a message to tell, and we've got a story to tell, and for so many years we've been defined by others, that it'll be such a breath of fresh air if we could define ourselves, and if we could tell our story to folks who are going to appreciate it. Not everybody's going to appreciate our story. They're going to look at it with a jaundiced eye and say, look, it's not, it's not all that. But those, I think, that really do understand, governance, I think we'll see, what a strong story we have to tell. And sometimes we need help. We need professionals to help us tell that story. And so I think, having good representatives on our behalf do that in a very effective way. Government, does a lot of things well. I don't think we know how to message well. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. Just like, we don't know, how to do many things well. We do other things well, but I think we need partners to help us tell that story that are maybe more effective at it. And look, we certainly have the, the right story. It's just how do we message it? So with that, we've come to the end of our agenda. Anything from staff?
No report.
No report? Councilwoman?
I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out here today. Our friends from TPA, League of Cities, and Holland and Knight, of course. I'm very excited to be on this committee, and I'm looking forward to many more great accomplishments. Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody as well as the councilwoman did for coming, and welcome to everybody, and it's great to have you here in person. And I want to personally thank my colleague, Councilwoman Mesqua, because these committees, are in addition to the work that we do at regular council meetings, at neighborhood association meetings, and ad nauseum. So to be on these committees takes work, takes time, So thank you, Councilwoman, for, making sure that, this committee didn't go dark. Because, as you can see, so much has been done just since this committee's been revived, that it's a testament to your commitment to the work here. So thank you for your leadership in doing that. And I think with that, we'll adjourn until the 21st of June. Thank you very much.